I'm Curtis Clark, and together with Troy Kay, we've launched Catalyst for Change to amplify the voices that are too often missing from workforce and education policy discussions. It's the innovators, the disruptors, the leaders who see obstacles as invitations. These aren't polite panel discussions, they're working sessions with the people who are building tomorrow's solutions. Today's guest is exactly that kind of leader. And what we're about to explore has real implications for anyone shaping skills, policy, and practice. Now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our guest, Dr. Asheley Jones. Dr. Jones is an internationally recognized agent of change in workforce development and skills credentialing. She has revolutionized how organizations identify, develop, and credential workforce capabilities. Her groundbreaking work spans government policy, higher education curriculum transformation, and industry innovation, making her one of Australia's most influential voices in aligning skills development with economic growth and organizational success. Ash, welcome to Catalyst for Change.
Thanks very much, Curtis. It's great to be here.
So Ash, I'm going to take us into the conversation, and I want to start with a question that Curtis just alluded to in your intro a little bit. You've led education transformation at the Australian Computer Society. You've built outcome-based credentials at Deakin Co, and now you're shaping the learning strategy at CPA Australia. And so just in those three examples alone, you have a rare vantage point that goes across technology, higher education, and professional services. And that's something I'm familiar with through my career as well. And so I'm curious, like when you look across those three diverse entities, what would you say is maybe a connecting thread across those?
Great question. Thanks, Troy. Look, I think when I look back on the ways in which these have interconnected, most certainly skill capability frameworks. When I started at the Australian Computer Society, and we were looking at how we might be able to skill globally, particularly with the IT technology requirements, we were really looking at the ways in which we could baseline skill capability and then how we could look at various levels of mastery and be able to upskill. So that's when I really came across Skills Framework for the Information Age, with a global framework that was then able to be used both to be able to talk to employers, to learners, to those operating within academia. A common language is what I was able to come up with in order to be able to look at accrediting university courses, underpinning learning and development, and then being able to utilize that across industry. That then led to being able to build skill diagnostic tools and the ways in which that could then be utilised. So already starting to look at the way ed and tech come together and how you can actually utilise that on a high level to be able to really start to benchmark skill capability and then how you could start to uplift that. Then when I went to Deakin Co, which is the commercial arm of Deakin University and was very much within the industry section in looking at how to develop professional skill capabilities, realising that the old type of master's programs weren't working because we have people with incredible breadths of experience and knowledge. And how do we actually allow for that instead of getting them to do the one-size-fits-all master's programs, which had their time and place? We are now moving away from that with Burson and just-in-time learning, recognition of various different skills and the ways in which we can then start to evidence people's capabilities and look at ways in which we then plug in the various parts of the skill gaps that they require. So we built there a Masters of Professional program where we were really able to utilise people's skills and capabilities based again against a skills capability framework mapped to the Australian qualifications framework, national qualifications, and then be able to utilise that to be able to really demonstrate capability And I was then fortuitous enough to be able to start using authentic assessment. How is it that we can start to evidence people's capabilities against evidence that they can bring from real work-life scenarios, rather than get them to do abstract learning, rote learning, using high test exams, etc. So then bringing all of that together to come to CPA Australia, which is the global accounting body here in Australia with 175,000 members, with various different types of skill sets outside of the discipline specific. And so again, how is it that we can then give learning journeys to those that are either early entrants, current careerists, and how is it that we can really maintain the robust rigor of assessment, but at the same time give the pieces of education, learning and development that are required in order to be able to upskill and be work future ready without making everyone go through the sausage machine of learning that just is no longer required.
I love that. Especially what's resonating with me is the start with the framework and then build upon that. The common language component, I think, resonated quite a bit as well. So like really strong foundational components is what I'm hearing as a core theme there too, which is excellent. Curtis, I know you had a question as well that you wanted to follow up on.
Sure. And I think really you touched on that, Troy, in sense of that, what's the common language? And that's about the skills and capability. Can you walk us through what you learned about making these conversations productive rather than just frustrating?
Oh, that's such a good question. Look, I think at the end of the day, everybody has business problems that they want to solve. Everybody wants to be able to work with autonomous professionals that actually can think for themselves, can apply their critical thinking and their problem solving. So I think if you can take it down to what are the real pain points within a business, or what is it that a learner really is struggling to develop, then you actually take it down to a real conversation rather than that abstract, where are the skill gaps, what's the capability, what's the difference between a capability and a competency, and you really start to anchor it into meaningful language. It is, again, all about a common language, right? A transparency, an understanding of where pain points are and what it is that you can do in order to be able to assist in helping with that.
No, perfect. I love the ability to bring that together in that common understanding, but bringing it down to the learner and recognizing where they're coming from. And that becomes a critical piece. So often we hear oh no, we know what you want, without really asking what the learner needs and what we can articulate around that space as well. So I just want to now go into some of the work that you've done with CPA Australia and the Australia Computer Society. Now, what's interesting is that you've co-designed training programs across finance and technology in these two areas. Areas like AI ethics, cybersecurity, and digital capability. But these are two major professional associations choosing to collaborate rather than stay in their normal lanes. Tell us how you came and brought this together and what made this partnership possible.
Look, I think first of all, the world is changing very dramatically. And I think there is a real sense that partnering is absolutely the way to go. In the same way that there is no one size fits all in learning any longer, the ability for associations or even the learning ecosystem itself to be able to come together and to work together makes us stronger, not weaker. So I think those stay in your swim lanes, those swim lanes have just merged. There are no very straight. One of the reasons for coming together is the interconnection between finance and IT is the synergies are just absolutely there. And you can take it from any particular level, whether it be at the C-suite, the CFO absolutely has to be able to talk to the CIO, has to understand why there is an importance to invest in cybersecurity. In the same way that the CIO has to be able to speak to the CFO and explain procurement and how to be able to do that in a very meaningful way. And then if we look at AI and the ubiquitous of AI across various different areas, again, the synergies are just absolutely there. It was a no-brainer to come up with finance for non-financiers and so be able to offer that through ACS to their members. And similarly, cybersecurity and understanding the types of measures that an accounting professional should have within their own business. And so it just becomes common sense to be able to upskill, cross-skill in the ways that degrees are no longer that purist accounting degree. Now we have commerce or business and law with accounting. So it really is recognising the ways in which interdiscipline that we've all been trying to do for a very long time is actually becoming a practice because of the needs of the labour market.
So this is quite a remarkable sort of change management strategy as well, in terms of moving these partnerships, but also the recognition of what C-suite needs to understand across these sort of different silos and down within the organization itself. That must have been quite a remarkable sort of experience for you to be engaged in that level of change management at the educational level.
Absolutely. And this is why I'm still very passionate about what I do, because the opportunities to be able to bring partners together, because everybody has a passion to be able to educate, to be able to change, and then to be able to bring the right partners together and to be able to excite people to actually explore ways to work together is a real privilege. I love that part of my role. It's really good.
Ah, that's so exciting and infectious, I can imagine. So I've
Absolutely.
got one more before I want to turn it over to Troy again. And this goes a little bit to this idea that we're not using old things, we're looking at the future and we're looking at that transition. And you've identified 6 skills professionals need now, not yesterday, but now and into the future. AI and automation, ethical decision making, sustainability, data storytelling, digital fluency, and critical thinking. Now, these aren't narrow technical skills. They're capabilities that touch on almost all the roles within our economy, and certainly even where the World Economic Forum is saying these are part of the top 10 skills to the future. Now, how do we think about developing these capabilities at scale? Like not one off, okay, this organization or this slim silo should take it, but broadly. And how do you make sure that they stick?
Look, it's one that everyone's grappling with, right? And I'm not suggesting that I have the answer. But one
Oh,
of the
come on,
things,
I know you do.
really, if we look at it, it really comes down to authentic assessment, workplace assessment practices. One of the things that has worked across all of the areas that I've worked in is working with industry, finding those problems I was talking about earlier. What are the business problems that you need solved? And then how do we make learning and development really meaningful as an ROI within the business by then putting the learning front and center of those particular issues, and then having the application of knowledge and the various different experience from those learners solve those problems, so that immediately you are actively increasing the skills within the organization, applying it to needs. And so learning actually becomes central rather than the periphery of what it is that is required in order to upskill. Once employers realize the immediate return that you can have on centralizing and making learning and development a fundamental part of return on investment, then it becomes a lot easier to be able to scale up capability and to make it stick. Instead of going away to those 2-day workshops and remembering 10% of it, coming back with all good intent and never implying any of it because it doesn't actually fit in, if you actually make the learning part of the business, then you solve problems and you actually start to really generate a learner centricity that people thrive in.
So it's really like a work integrated model. And it's interesting because we talk about university students now. We need to give them more opportunities to be engaged with work integrating and co-op environments. You've now reversed that and said those who are already in the workspace need to start using that context and apply it and make it stick. It feels vibrant and alive at that moment. Yeah, I love
Absolutely.
that. That's an incredible, again, a change management approach as well.
Spot on. Yeah.
And it's good segue into the question I wanted to ask around the fact that a lot of organizations that I work with, and even in my own organization, we're realizing that we're facing a pretty critical decision around that very point. Like you mentioned, you said it earlier, the world is changing dramatically. The future skills that are needed are very different than the skills maybe that are being developed now. And so I'm curious about that challenge that organizations have around, do we build an internal capability, as you've alluded to, around skills development and programs, and what kind of investment could that look like? Or should we, and arguably can we, rely on traditional education providers to catch up a little bit in that matching of, okay, as education providers, we're providing you the skills that you need to enter the workforce. And I know there's a bit of tension in that, and you've been on both sides of the equation. So I'm curious, like, what would you advise organizations to think about? Should they be having conversations with education providers and saying, here's what we need, please catch up? Should they be investing in building in-house and maybe leaving education providers a little bit behind and hoping they'll catch up? Where would you advise someone as they look at that question?
Great question. Look, I think, again, one size does not fit all. And when I spoke earlier about partnership, I think that is just as equally important in the scenario that you're posting there. I think that if we look at, and it depends upon the maturity of the organization, the budget that they have. So consequently, it really does stem down to what can the organization do well? Is it internal leadership programs that actually offer the opportunity to upskill within those employability skills, those soft skills we're now calling in Australia employability skills? Or is it deep discipline specific? And so therefore you work with a professional association, or do you partner with a university? Because universities are changing, they are transforming, and they are really looking for opportunities to work with industry. They're not great at it, but I think, again, boiling it down to what is the problem, what is the skill gap, what is it you are trying to address. Once you've answered that question, you can then determine whether or not you build internally or whether or not you go outside. When I look at what we're doing, we are really, as a member organisation, pivoting quite dramatically to becoming an education provider. But that's because we're in that sweet spot niche of being able to work with the universities we accredit and the industries that we certify designation of accounting professional. And so consequently, where is it that I build within the areas of finance for non-financiers, data storytelling, how to become a CFO from a financial controller? But if I'm going to do AI, I'm going to partner with a university or with an entrepreneurial AI company to be able to, because they've got the deep subject matter expertise that I need. And so consequently, why would I try to be all things to all people? So I think, again, it's where's your specialism? Where do you know you're really good at what you do? And so therefore, that's where you provide the value add. And where is it you then partner in order to be able to upskill and uplift? Because it also has to be sticky, to that earlier comment. And it also has to be that you really can get an ROI on it. So we come back again to that work integrated learning. How is it you can work with others and give them the challenge of being able to provide you with the learning that you need that is actually going to upskill? One of the things I think about whenever I'm trying to put together a product service for upskilling is we worked when I was at Deakin Co with a superannuation company, and they wanted to upskill within data analytics. And so we put together a 6-month program, 3 months of training, and then there was a wicked problem that needed to be solved across the business. And teams were put together. And so Deakin provided the subject matter expertise, the workshops, the learning and development. But the company itself then put around champions and the case studies and simulations that were going to be utilised. There was a 10% uplift in AI capacity, data analytics at the end of that, and it's still going strong 2.5 years later. So it's finding the right meaningful mechanisms and levers within the company and the ways in which you partner significantly to really understand what it is you're trying to achieve, how you're going to get there, and how you're going to measure that success.
And I can't help but think, if you flip it around to the consumer of the learning, the evaluation that they would have going into a learning program at an institution versus what an employer could offer that value of the learning path and the stickiness of the learning is going to increase so much more. Like they're going to evaluate that choice based on, oh, this path actually looks good, it's been proven, or this organization truly invests a lot in their people, in skills that make a difference. Like those are going to be factors that play into employees' decisions around where they spend their time and where they contribute. Yeah.
Absolutely, Troy. And that's it as well, right? We are now working with 5 generations of employees and different aspects, different attitudes, different ways of learning. And certainly the younger generation are really looking for the ways in which their careers and their aspirations are going to be met by employees. The contract is now very different in terms of the expectations on both sides are pretty significant. And so if you're not going to upskill and maintain skill relevancy, you're going to lose out to competitors.
So true. It's like the world is moving so quickly that if you're not adapting, you are going to be left behind in so many ways. And this kind of leads me into the question around, we're constantly talking about closing that skills gap, but it's always shifting as well. It's a moving target, and it's one about developing those skills it's about nimble adaptation as well. Now, you've been at the coalface of this reality. Obviously, you've seen it, you're experiencing it, and you're finding ways out of it. What's the inconvenient truth about skills development that most institutions are still grappling with and refuse to acknowledge? We're moving forward. There are those who just like, no, we're good. Thank you very much. What's that inconvenient truth that they're dealing with?
It is, as you said, it's there whether you have the blinkers or not. Learning is changing fundamentally. It's not your next LMS. It's not your learning content. It's more about clarity of what people can prove, the capabilities they need to uplift and demonstrate, and the ways in which employers, academics, learning and development offerings are actually situated to be able to ensure learner centricity and the ways in which we can upskill on the job at the same time. Content is no longer king, hasn't been for quite some time, and that is going to move more and more rapidly with AI, with all of the automation, with all of the plethora of knowledge that is out there. It is way more about providing the opportunities for people to explore their skills, develop their skills, pivot their skills, refine their skills, and being given the opportunities in which to do.
I wish I could have had that 5 years ago when I was having many of these conversations with folks. And also the traditional understanding is, we know what you want, so just sit down and take it, and
you'll be all right.
You'll be all right. We know the content you want. And I think that's that sort of inconvenient truth that no, you don't have the content, and content is not king or queen. It's time to move on. That's a brilliant sort of focus for the future indeed. So, Troy, I think you had a final question here, but this has just been amazing.
It has been. And you alluded to it a little bit, Curtis. I'm curious about the future, Ash. And let's say things start to progress in the ways that we know they need to, and we know that inevitably they will by way of necessity. What do you think is maybe the next transformation in professional learning and skills development that people aren't talking enough about today, right? Getting ready for that future. It's moving fast, so we got to be talking about it to be ready. Or asked another way, what should leaders be betting on now? What should we be thinking about?
Look, I've alluded to, I think, throughout the whole of this conversation, it's structural change. Curtis has brought up some great examples of how, this is what you need to do and you'll be all right. The fact of the matter is there is no clear pathways anymore. There are ways to pivot. There are ways to come at things with an experience to be able to get into a whole new job. When we look at the kind of stuff that Matt has done in terms of looking at skill sets and the ways in which, if you're an accountant, you're 3 steps away from actually being great as cybersecurity, or the ways in which you can move careers because of the base skills that you have that are undertaken. So there needs to be a structural change, a recognition that we need to start looking at skill capability within people. How good are their problem solving and their critical thinking? Are they resilient? Can they negotiate? I want them, no matter where they've operated, I can use them within my business because I know that they are going to add value. They're going to give a different lens to what it is that I'm doing. So structural change, PDs, throw them out. What is it, the skills that you require for that role? And then start to look at the funnel and who you might be able to bring in. Now that we're using AI as interns, the whole world has changed. So we need to catch up with it. We need to structurally change to actually be more adaptive, flexible, and really start to recognize that there are a lot of skilled people out there that actually could pivot and do some wondrous things if we gave them the opportunity.
Yeah, and I'll recall that you mentioned that authentic assessment, and that's really stuck with me, like enabling that across the board along with the support or the structural changes. So critical, right? Like throughout the CV. I love that quote, right? Like it's about authentically assessing someone's skills based on the needs, not based on their degree necessarily of the box. Yeah.
And look, the last thing I would say is digital badging, right? The way in which we can actually utilize encrypted digital badges to be able to prove capability. So authentic assessment, show how it was proven that you are a fabulous communicator or a great problem solver, and then be able to utilize that on your LinkedIn or social media platforms to be able to prove capability that a third party has verified. Again, within that structural change, authentic assessment, validation by a third party, and the ability to be able to show those innate critical thinking, problem solving skills.
So I just want to follow up on this one little bit. Like, again, each question we could go off for hours here, but just in a kind of a final moment, are the learners ready for this? Because this is something, again, it's one thing to say, here's the strategy, but those who are doing that transition, those who are being skilled and reskilled, the learners who are coming through now, coming out of our post-secondaries, are they ready for this?
Oh, they're so far ahead of us. Absolutely. We're trying to catch up with them. That's what I'm saying. The whole world has changed, and we are still stuck in this 1600s academic bubble that has imploded, and we're still trying to work within the facets of an outdated education mechanism. And obviously we need to keep the rigor. Obviously I'm not suggesting that universities do not have a place, far from it. What I'm saying is they need to really adapt and change, because the learners that are coming through now are expecting a completely different model, and if the universities don't provide it, somebody else will.
Exactly.
It's a good note to end on. Thank you so much, Dr. Jones. Ash, It's been a pleasure. Great conversation. Thank you for spending some time with us today.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Take care, Ash. Thank you. That was just a remarkable conversation.
Yeah.
I think everyone we're having is just expanding my mind in terms of what are the options, what are the possibilities, and different perspectives that we sometimes just take for granted. I think what strikes me about our conversation with Ash is that she certainly represents something we don't see enough of in the workforce development. And that's someone who stopped waiting for the system to fix the problem. She's now building the infrastructure and the models that we actually need as we move into the future. And I think certainly her work shows us that what can be possible when we start changing around the thinking of integration as opposed to isolation, and how we prioritize credentials over skills and a variety of different sort of approaches. But it's a conversation that we certainly need to have more frequently about what those possibilities are. And she's got incredible examples to support that.
I got a sense that there's not a making light of the complexity of what has to happen. It's not an easy path, but my big takeaway from the conversation with her is that it's very feasible, like pragmatic thinking, start with a structure, start with a framework, use the data the way that you should be using the data. There's not huge revolutionary steps to get this going in the right direction, but there has to be that willingness to start down the path. And if it's not going to be from within, then it's going to be the future employees, the students coming out of the systems. It's going to be them that are making the decisions, as she said at the end. So I think it's such a nice call to action from such a lovely lady. It was a great conversation. I loved it.
Yeah, no, and I can only imagine that our next set of conversations are going to be as enlightening and engaging as well. What a great trajectory we're on right now.
Agreed. Agreed.
All right.
Looking forward to the next one.
You betcha. Thank you.
Take care, sir.